Let's get salty!
Everyone, Zeddy here again today with a brand new video. And before we get into the topic, which is going to be a spicy one, probably hotly debated, I want to thank everybody. We just recently hit 22,000 subscribers on YouTube. Ridiculous. Another milestone. We're inching closer to 25,000, like the quarter mark. And I just want to thank everybody who keeps clicking that sub button, keeps supporting the channel. It means a lot. And just thank you guys. It's awesome. Anyways, let's get into the video. The topic of the video, which is, should Hearthstone delete Priest? And before you go, like, obviously, no, it's, you know, it's a class. Why would you remove it from the game? I want to get into like the whole like mythos and like the whole reason why so many people just outright seem to want to delete it. Board Control, look at this tweet from Board Control, is now on the Hearthstone development team, infamously tweeted this summer, delete Priest with a picture of Mindrender Ellucia. There was like a music video by Lesamos about deleting Priest that got a pretty funny reaction out of Ixar on Twitter. As recent as like a few days ago, Naviute recently tweeted, just remove Priest and, you know, replace it with Monk, and that would make everybody happy. Win-win. Like, it's a big meme. You look on like YouTube videos, there's like delete Priest memes. I just had this emote commissioned. If you're a sub to me on Twitch, you can spam this emote of deleting Priest, putting Anduin in the recycle bin. So why do people hate it so much, more than any other class? There's so many classes that have been better than it, have done more ridiculous things, but people just can't stand Priest. So before I answer, should it be deleted? Let's go through like the history of Priest, you know, some of the key archetypes of what it's done, how it's infuriated people, or maybe people have enjoyed certain things, and give my unbiased opinion, as well as your guys'. I asked this question here on Twitter, and there was one really strong response I will highlight at the end to like kind of summarize everything. So let's dive into it. So like Priest originally, when it started out, classic Hearthstone, very like control based, you know, like mind control, some buffs, you know, board clears, you know, pretty primitive stuff in classic and basic. You had divine spirit, inner fire. You could do a little bit of that with like Injured Blade Master, circle of healing, but overall pretty reasonable stuff, you know, control combo. It's okay. Wasn't, you know, the most insane class out the gate. It's pretty weak. I probably don't think it'll do great in the new classic mode, but it's a representation like World Championships. And so there was a couple of pretty decent decks that evolved later on. Like during Mean Streets, you had like Draken Operative, which spawned Dragon Priest, which was very strong. An Operative, Nether Spite Historian, some other stuff. It's a mid-range deck. It had some value. You could copy cards from your opponent's deck through Operative, which drove me insane. But I ended up getting Golden Priest playing this deck, and a lot of people really enjoy their old Dragon Priest. It's just a good old-fashioned mid-range deck. When Priest really came into the forefront of being like a really superior and dominant class was during the Frozen Throne, where all of a sudden you had Razakis Priest, you had Raza and Anduin. Raza, I think, was in Mean Streets, and then Anduin came out in Frozen Throne, and you had this crazy Highlander OTK deck that was really good in both Standard and Wild. Your finisher was like Prophet Velen, Radiant Elemental, Mind Blast, just a good finisher. And then you had Big Priest, because he had like Eternal Servitude, Shadow Essence, and I think a Sibian Statue all came out during Frozen Throne, and that put Big Priest on the map and made it a really good deck. And you had Barnes as well, and that's like, I know those decks were really good and hated it in a lot of ways, but I never got the delete Priest vibes. It was just like, these decks are really strong, they're obnoxious, can we, you know, tone them down? And eventually Raza got nerfed, and Big Priest literally never got nerfed like ever until like 2.5 years later when they nerfed Barnes finally. But yeah, so those were the decks. And then as time moved on, yeah, like Razakis got nerfed, and, you know, things kind of, it slipped into the middle of the meta. And then move on like a year or so, you had like Cloning Gallery Priest pop up during like Boomsday, kind of. It was a 9-mana spell. You get a bunch of 1/1s, and you could get 1/1 Radiant Elemental, a 1/1 Prophet Velen, Malagos, and then just like OTK with like Mind Blast and Holy Smites, or go off with random stuff with like Lyra. And it was a ridiculous deck. It drove me nuts because it countered what I like to play, but a lot of people absolutely love playing Gallery Priest. I remember Asmodai and Theo were huge on that deck. I'm sure they look fondly back on it, and it was a very powerful deck. It wasn't oppressive, it was just very strong, and I don't think any card in it ever got nerfed, if I can remember correctly. It was just a really solid deck. So moving on, once that got like Hall of Famed and things moved on, Priest didn't really look very good for like the next year until like Old came out. and Inner Fire Priest emerged as like the top tier deck. You had like High Priest Met come out, Psychopomp, there was Netherset Ritualist, I think it's called, and you had Injured Tolvir, and all of a sudden Inner Fire Priest became ridiculous. And all these high high health minions that could heal up and just win the game until the point they eventually nerfed extra arms and the deck was dialed back a little bit. But yeah, this is like the last really strong priest deck before the rework. And let's just get right into it. The rework occurred. That was about a year ago from now. And all of a sudden, no more Divine Spirit, no more Northshire Cleric, no more damage. Mind Blast got Hall of Famed a little bit earlier, but Holy Smite no longer went face. Holy Nova no longer went face. Prophet Velen was Hall of Famed. Akanai, Shadow Form, all these cards. The deck became no draw, no damage, and they reworked it to be this spell value generation thing, and that's when Galakrond Priest emerged. Galakrond didn't really see much play during Descent of Dragons, but after the rework, Galakrond became pretty good because he had like cheap death, he had all these value generators, and that's basically what Ashes of Outland Priest looked like, was Galakrond. And that's when people started to really start, the rumblings of Delete Priest started to pop up. It was the whole deck archetype of Priest became these really boring, grindy mirrors. No longer were there damage or these explosive combo turns of, like, let's say Inner Fire combo or Prophet Velen combo. Those were gone. It was a slow grind, and your opponent would just generate cards and slowly grind you down and maybe generate your cards with the buff Thought Steal, because buff Thought Steal was pretty prevalent, right? It seemed to get more spell heavy, but the big turning point for the absolute movement in Delete Priest was Mindrender Ellucia. First emerged as a 2-drop, it's now 3, but you already had Priest, which played really slow, grindy, frustrating games around card generation you could no longer play around. It was no longer like, at least you could play around Divine Spirit, Inner Fire. There was like Lyra stuff you couldn't play around back in the day, but now it became Mindrender Ellucia, it became Sethic Veilweaver, Infinite Spells, Random Dragons from your in Darkmoon Fair. The class is now devolved into this infinite value, random card generation frustration, and now you have Mindrender Ellucia. The one weakness that Priest seemed to have was it had no way to deal with combos. It just kind of like, it was slow, but you could play like a deck that just, it couldn't interact with, you could beat them up like a Malagos Drew, but all of a sudden now they could just steal your hand for dirt cheap and just throw your cards away, and that is a horrible feeling. So the Delete Priest feeling really started to pop up throughout the last year, and it brings me to the whole rework thing. I really feel like the rework for Priest over the past year has been a failure. I know I throw that word around a lot. I use like in titles like, was this a failure? Was this a failure? I like to rank things on whether it was good or bad, and if it's bad, it's kind of a failure. And Priest, if you look at it, Priest doesn't even have a good win rate. Like on HS Replay, it's the lowest ranked class in the game. Vicious Syndicate never really has it that high up. It's never that good, but it's still that hated that you'd still rather not play against a Priest than Weapon Rogue sometimes, which is obviously very well hated and very heated topic right now. That Priest is not even that good, but its playstyle is so frustrating that they steal your stuff, they steal your minions with a Cabal Acolyte, they refuse to let you attack the board with a Wave of Apathy, they take your hand with Mindrender Ellucia. They do all these things that are just not fun when you're facing them. It can be fun to play as because it's freaking evil and like you get to screw with your opponent. But overall, pretty much everything Priest does is very non-interactive and very unfun. It's this whole interactive thing. I brought that up in Weapon Rogue. We'll probably bring that up because I'm probably going to do a combo video talking about the problem with today's combo decks. It's just that interactive nature. You can't interact with the random cards they generate. You have no idea, and they generate so many in a game. You can't interact with their way of stealing your stuff through Mindrender Ellucia, and there's no way to really kill them off half the time because of cards like Apotheosis that give them like these huge heal waves. So the class is very frustrating. The rework has led to this. It's led them to no real win condition other than pissing you off. Priest's win condition is to frustrate you. It's to exhaust you. It's to just make you suffer, whether it's stealing your stuff, spamming random cards. It's just a constant state of making you suffer and never really killing you with damage, with a minion combo, nothing. There's nothing like that. That's all gone. That's all in the past. And I think people would rather die to Raza Anduin or Prophet Velen Mind Blast than slowly get grinded down over like a 30-minute game where you might win, you might lose, but overall you're gonna be frustrated and leave that game just like, why in the hell do I have to play against this? So that's my reasoning of why Priest, the rework in itself has been a failure. The win condition's awful, the playstyle's awful to face, and I think with the return of Shadow Form, they say they're returning Shadow Form, they might enter some actual fun win conditions again for priests. So my hopes are a little bit high that priests can become a less hated class. So should we delete priest? Should we delete priest and remove it from the game? Answer is simple. No, it just needs to be reworked again in a way. There's some good stuff here. You have control stuff. You have good removal, but to focus its entire game plan on stealing your opponent's cards or generating random stuff and cheating mana with spells is just horrible to face. It's not fun. And I do hope that this, like I said, the Shadow Form thing can change things up. And as I mentioned earlier, I tweeted out asking, would Hearthstone be a better game with or without Priest? And Ridiculous Hat, a really, knowledgeable Hearthstone guy, personality, responded with, there are players who deeply identify with Priest, and the class is always disproportionately popular, even when the win rate is low, which is right now. Not only is Hearthstone better with Priest, it would be incomplete without it. And I agree. Can you imagine Hearthstone without Priest? As Concerned Mom told me, how else would he be able to enjoy my salty tears without it? Like, the class needs to be there. I think it is proper, but it just needs to be reworked in a way that it's less frustrating to face. It can keep the core aspects of stealing cards, of doing crazy spell stuff, but I feel like give it a realistic win condition that doesn't feel awful, and we'd be in a lot better spot. And I think Team 5 realizes that to an extent, especially when they're talking about bringing Shadow Form back. We'll see as time goes on with this new expansion reveal what Priest can lead to, because I've been watching like players like Zeddy a lot, who's a Priest main a lot lately. He can't stand the class direction. He wants those things back. He wants like Akanai back. He wants that type of stuff back. He seems to really enjoy that, and I hope it gets back to that. And I don't want them to remove Priest. I just want them to get it that old direction to extent. A mix of the old with a mix of the new, I think would be really good. But let me know in the comments below. Do you think Priest should be removed? Is it good for the game or bad for the game? And personally, I can't stand facing it. It's infuriating to me right now, but I'll stomach it for the hope that Priest can be saved and become a slightly more tolerable class. Doesn't have to be beloved, just at least a bit more tolerable. If you enjoyed the video, please like and subscribe. Have a great day and stay salty, my friends.